these are the moments where it would be really badass to have like an 8-bit introduction to this channel. But either way, Periphery with 3 select difficulty. Highly anticipated disc. Here we are in July in 2015. It was January, another J month, where we got the last Periphery disc. In fact, we got 2 of them, the Juggernaut cycle, Alpha and Omega. And with that album, they certainly showcased the sort of expanse of their palette. They showed that they had a lot to accomplish with that disc in order to maybe silence some critics. Either that or showcase that moving forward they had a lot more to work with than they had perhaps shown before. They evolved, they had grown, and that's what you want to see with a group. So going back to the number construct, going back to having some references in song names and sort of taking it back to some of the basics is one that is exciting for a lot of Periphery fans, considering they're able to apply some of the lessons learned from the Juggernaut cycle to that which they already had accomplished. So let's see if they had accomplished that indeed. So, whenever The Price is Wrong, the very first cutoff of this album, first came out, I admit that I was a little worried about this album, principally because while I enjoyed the sort of rapid-fire delivery that this song gives, and it's very high energy, we all know that Periphery has the ability to be a little bit more expansive. After tackling 11-minute-long songs on Juggernaut Omega, we definitely thought that Periphery was not going to just jump back into a 4-minute single-style structure song, and in reality, that is exactly not what happened. It really did not happen whatsoever. This happens to be one of the shortest tracks on the album. The only one that is shorter is Catch Fire, and that's only by 3 seconds. So 3 minutes and 53 seconds versus 3:56. But really, The Price is Wrong serves as a little bit of an energetic opener that goes right into Motormouth and Marigold, both of which begin the expansiveness a little bit at a time, essentially, with Motormouth clocking in at just under 5 minutes and Marigold going at 7.5. Now, whenever you see that 7-minute mark treading toward 8, that's the maximum that you're going to see on this album. However, they do go a little bit lengthier with these compositions, and it's one that actually is the reason why this 11-track affair also boasts a 64-minute runtime. But Marigold was one that we got a little bit after The Price is Wrong and gave folks a little bit more in the way of clarity as to what 3 select difficulty was going to be all about. In reality, they could have said 3 select style or 3 select genre, because at times the gent is able to break down into just progressive. Sometimes it's almost like Gentcore, where they have a little bit of that hardcore element that really is something that accompanies gent in the first place, but just seems like they're trying to handle that with a lot more in the way of... Basically, you can imagine the hats being backwards, the heads banging as they're pounding out these rhythms and setting up the next portions of the song. You don't see this very often on this album, but whenever it's present, it definitely makes its presence known in a big way. Going into The Way the News Goes, which is a Rick and Morty reference, I'm assuming, because that's the way the news goes. This 5-minute track is one that sets up really a lot more than even Marigold did. It sets up the fact that this album has the ability to sort of flip-flop a little bit, and not in terms of whether it's good or bad, but in its pacing, in its timing. The fact that this band now has really experted the whole idea that a balanced album is one that tends to have a terrific flow to it, one that has a terrific ebb and flow, and one that keeps their listeners guessing a little bit. This is not an album that feels like it gets horrendously predictable. This is instead one that, while you start to pick up a little bit on the overall theme or the overall body of work, it still offers you surprises at every pass. So the Juggernaut cycle does seem to have really had an effect on the way that these guys write, even though this was something that was present even as far back as 2, This One's Going to Hurt. As I remember stating in that review, it was almost like a tale of 2 sides of the album. That's not the case with 3. Instead, this is the tale of one album that has 2 sides that show up intermittently, and both of these sides have a lot to offer. You see, the aggressiveness that you get with songs such as The Price is Wrong, with Catch Fire, that you'll hear a little bit more scattered about the other tracks off of this album, and even into some of the more ambient sections of like Prayer Position or even the tail end of Marigold. That aggressiveness, preceding that ambience definitely gives it a nice offsetting approach. It kind of gives you a little bit of a piece of breathing room. Now, I think that the ambience at the end of Marigold does run a little long. It's something that probably could have used a little bit of shortening, but at that state, it's also something that really lets you breathe after such an expansive track, one that had a little bit more to offer than perhaps Motormouth and The Price is Wrong before it. But then whenever you get deeper into this, whenever you get into songs such as Absalom, you really understand that you sort of need to have that sort of stoppage point. You need to have that little bit of a breathing portion in order to really almost separate acts on this album, because it seems as though this is one that has further separation than that which we see at face value. Either way, whether this is conceptual or all completely ludicrous, this is one that has a very well-designed lineup, and that's something that's very important for an album. If I were to, cite 5 things that makes an album very good, the way in which the tracks are presented would be right up there on that list, because it's almost essential, because it basically counts as your presentation. Overall, Periphery's charm on this album is based off of the fact that every song could be a brand new adventure. It's something that gives you a little bit of surprise whenever you hear what they do next, and also continues to make their sound feel a little bit fresh. Now, I know there's going to be some out there that listen to these vocals, the cleans, as opposed to some of the gruff growls, which they will just cite as a little bit typical. But these clean vocals will not be for everybody. They'll say, well, that's the reason why I can't get into this band, because it sounds too close to other genres of music that I just can't get into. And that's kind of an unfair assumption with these guys, considering this is a group that is taking something that essentially started off of a basic noise, a basic sound, and have really taken that idea and crafted a true subgenre around it. For those that feel that gent is a bona fide subgenre, this is an album that is trying to verify that and try to prove that is true. And the funny thing is that I have a feeling that if people haven't been won over by Periphery yet, this may be the album that doesn't. Yeah. 2 albums ago with 2, I stated that Periphery might break through, become part of the mainstream. While that didn't really happen, I still haven't heard Periphery on the radio and probably never will. They still made a lot of waves, and it's a name now that is recognized by many. With 3, I have a feeling that it's going to continue the cycle of converting some of those folks that didn't want to believe that gent was anything more than a flavor of the week into recognizing that it has some viability and it has potential for further expansion. There's a way that this could be applied even further in the metal music construct, or even just within the rock music construct. This is actually one that is not very limiting. It's instead one that has infinite possibilities. Overall, one of the biggest strengths of this album is the way in which that presentation has taken place. These 11 tracks flow together very nicely. It's that musical river that we talked about on a live stream at one point. It's one of those things where instead of the river getting wider and then closing off, potentially drying up, it's instead one that starts off as a lowly stream and becomes a large river, and eventually, once you're done with it, feels like it's as big as an ocean. I would give this album an 87 out of 100. This is a fantastic listen, and after doubting what Juggernaut was able to accomplish a little bit, I have to say I'm back on board with Periphery. I think this is their strongest album thus far. Some may disagree, considering this one does have a little bit more progression that molds in with the gent, but they started that a little bit with Alpha and Omega, so it shouldn't come as any surprise. Others may feel that the heaviness is something that's a bit lacking on this album, and I would have to disagree there. I think some of the riffs that they're able to concoct on here and swirl around that progression are some of the hardest that they have available, and it's simply based off of presentation. It's simply based off of how it hits after something else. It's the way in which the whole entire album sort of bonds together. But I want to know what you guys think about this album. What do you think about 3, Select Difficulty by Periphery? Let me know in the comments below. Is this Periphery's golden hour, their bright spot, their supernova? Or is this just an album that's going to be another flavor of the week in the gent community and will be long forgotten about by the end of 2016? Let me know in the comments below. My name is coverkillernation, and I will talk to you guys later. Maybe we will talk about, essential parts of an album, what makes it good, or how we can better promote things. Stay tuned.